let's look at Fabiano versus Maxime from 2 days ago on Friday. This is round 6. We'll do round 6, then round 7, then round 8. Round 8 was today. And so they played a Nightorf, which is to be expected because that's what MVL plays with black. Okay. And here, I mean, every move is theory. Every move. H3, F3, F4, bishop E3, bishop E2, bishop C4, A3 and A4, and bishop G5, and possibly knight B3 is theory, although that's a dumb move, but it's probably been played anyway. It used to be bishop G5 was the most common. Now probably the most common is bishop E3 and F3 in some move order. Okay, so he played H3, which obviously prevents the knight from coming to G4, and prepares to play G4 himself. Now when black plays the Nightorf, black can play either E6 or E5. In fact, if white plays a very slow move, I guess like H3, or bishop E2, or A4, black could just play a dragon with G6 and say that white's slow moves are, even slower than A6. And so, especially after A4, because then it's unlikely white's going to castle queenside and play some kind of Yugoslav attack. Okay, so he played E5, which is, the purpose of the Nightorf when Miguel Nightorf invented it was to play E5. And bishop E6. F4 is a very aggressive move. Now, normally you would say H3 is not aggressive, but actually it is because white wants to play G4. So, okay. Now, G6 is an unusual move. Obviously, if white could move again, white would play F5. So black's like, no, you're not going to play F5. And it makes some sense to play G6 because if the bishop is fianchettoed, normally you wouldn't want to play E5 because your bishop is hemmed in. But with the pawn on F4, if we ever take it, that releases the bishop. And the bishop's not super exciting on E7. So G6 makes some sense. And then he played the move G4, very exciting. Now, of course, this is all preparation by the players. They've analyzed these positions before, and they have with their coaches and their computers. So it seemed like Fabiano knew like one more move than MVL as far as the prep was concerned, but that didn't seem very important. Okay, MVL played the most aggressive way. Now, the reason you play knight BD7 in the Nightorf instead of knight C6 is sometimes you want to play knight C5, sometimes you want to play knight B6 to C4, and sometimes you want to sacrifice the exchange and take this pawn. You can't do any of those things with the knight on C6. So the knight on D7 is a little more flexible. In other variations, not this one, black plays B5, bishop B7, and once again, you wouldn't want the knight on C6, you want it on D7, so your bishop is good. So in the Nightorf, normally the knight goes to D7, and some would say if you played knight C6, it wouldn't even be a Nightorf anymore. Okay, so F5, and of course, we don't really have time to play bishop C4 because of G5, and white's just getting too much space, and the bishop's going to be no good. So we have to take, and if black does nothing, white is strategically winning because white has two bishops and more space. So black tries to punish white for moving all of his pawns by sacrificing the exchange and then taking on E4. And the immediate threat is checkmate in two moves with queen H4 and queen F2. Now again, it looks super exciting, and it is, but it's all preparation by the players, and it's been played before. But okay. White castled, which is the only good move. Queen H4 anyway. Obviously the queen's coming in. And once again, white played the only good move, bishop F3. Bishop wants to go to G2 and defend the king. Gf5, black wants to open the G file to the white king. So G takes would be suicide after rook G8 check. Okay, this keeps the G file closed. Now black's threatening queen G3, so king H2. And we have a very unusual position with this strange pawn structure where black has a knight and 2 pawns for a rook, and both kings are exposed. And again, this is still in the player's preparation. MVL played rook to G8, and the very unusual looking rook A4. It turns out this isn't even the end of Fabiano's preparation. Obviously, we're threatening this pawn, so knight F6. Not only defending the pawn, but putting pressure on the G4 pawn because this is pinned. G5, and he sacrifices in exchange again. And this position was known to both players before the game because they analyzed it at home with their coaches and their computers. Although you don't really know when these positions are going to happen. MVL didn't have to play G6 on move 9. It's not clear to MVL that white's going to go into this line, but he could. So they have to know a lot of lines in the Najdorf and just prepare for anything. Now, in these kind of situations, the opening preparation advantage should be to white, because if MVL plays the Najdorf every game, MVL has to be ready for basically any line that white can play. And when white chooses a line, like H3, F4, bishop E2, like this line, not only does MVL have to be ready for that, but for every other line white can play. Whereas, if Fabi plays white against the Najdorf, he can say, I'm going to play this line and only look at this line, not look at the other 10 lines that I could play. So they both have to remember what's going to happen because obviously Fabi doesn't know for sure that black's going to play G6 or even play this line at all. And now Fabi instantly played C4, which has never been played before. And now MVL went into a very long think, probably over 30 minutes. Now the point of C4 was somewhat missed by the commentators who were doing the commentary. They believed, as did I, that black eventually wants to play D5. And that looks pretty good. So C4 prevents D5, for the short term. But actually, white has an aggressive idea. White wants to play rook B4 and rook takes B7. And with the pawn on C4, you can't play B5. So if it was white's turn to move, white would play rook B4, and black doesn't really have a good defense of his B pawn. So C4 has two ideas. One is to stop D5 and one is to stop B5. So now I can play rook B4. Okay. Now when they analyzed after the game and when Fabiano came to the live commentary, he said, if you just look at the position, it looks like black is just winning. Black has 3 extra pawns. He's attacking white's king. And if the attack doesn't work, black just pushes all of his pawns. And what are white's rooks doing? So he had to analyze the position more deeply. And he said he concluded it was equal. But he thought if he looked at C4 at home with his coaches and computers, and MVL wasn't familiar with C4, and the computer says it's equal, then you obviously have an advantage. If somehow you at home could get to move 20 and the computer says it's equal, and you've analyzed the position with grandmaster coaches and computers, and your opponent's never seen the position, that sounds pretty good. Okay, so MVL thought for about 30 minutes and played queen H4. Now this has a very obvious idea, which even I saw. Black wants to play bishop H6, bishop F4 check. And then black's doing very well. So, gotta stop that. And Queen h4 isn't really an engine move, but it has this really obvious idea of attacking the white king. And the negative is white plays queen e1, which is the best move. That's what Fabi played. And we really have to trade queens here, because if black doesn't trade queens, he's going to move his queen to a square where this doesn't make any sense. You can't play queen h5 because your knight's hanging. So you're going to have to play queen g5 or queen h6. Well, your queen just came from g5. That doesn't make any sense. And queen h6 stops the bishop from going there. So he has to trade queens. Now the question is white going to win these weak pawns, or is black going to push all his center pawns and win? And the engine prefers white because white has 2 exchanges extra. Okay, he played bishop h6, which is very reasonable. Now, remember I said white wants to play rook b4, rook takes b7. Bishop h6 prevents that because of the fork on d2. Now, one thing that's a good lesson for you at home, when your opponent has one bishop, exactly one bishop, probably that's about half the time. Maybe 25% of the time, your opponent has no bishops. 25% of the time, they have 2 bishops. And maybe half the time, they have 1. Then there's the 0.0000001% of the time where they have 3 bishops. Other than my stream where I'm playing blitz chess, and I'm kidding, I've never seen a slow game where one side had 3 bishops. You would have to have 2 bishops and promote to a bishop. Anyway, when your opponent has 1 bishop, you tend to prefer to put everything on the opposite color so the bishop can't do anything. And you'll notice all of these are on white squares, so the bishop can't attack them. And if you play rook b4, you're putting all your important pieces on dark squares, which is not good. So he played the excellent rook to d1, stopping bishop d2, and now rook b4 is a big threat, as is rook takes d6. How do we stop rook takes d6 and stop rook takes b7? King d7 defends this pawn, and we're going to come defend this pawn. Now again, if black gets 2 or 3 moves in a row, he's going to play f5, f4, and she'll be coming down the mountain when she comes. It'll be a Cavavalanche, but it'll be an MVL lanche. Plato 27881, subscribe, thank you. Okay, so white's got to do something. Played c5, makes perfect sense. We have 2 threats. d5 is forced. Rook b4. You can't play king c6 because rook check skewers all the pieces. So you have to play king c7. And then rook b6. And this is why Fabiano played c5. It gets the pawn away from d6 so we can skewer all the pieces. I am Rosen is rating with 141. I thought Eric just started his stream like 30 minutes ago. Thanks, Eric. I saw Eric for a second. I don't think he saw me. I saw him in the tournament for a second. Yay. It's a Gator raid. Hooray. Thanks for the raid. You're the best. Okay. So he plays bishop f4 check, getting his bishop off of this line. Remember I said white wants to put his pieces on white squares so the bishop can't attack. Then knight d7. And if I play knight takes rook, or knight takes c5, or f5, that's looking too good. So he sacrifices one of the exchanges back to get rid of all of black's pawns. Makes sense. Very, very reasonable play. And then rook d7. So if anybody's going to win, it's going to be white, because white's going to take all these pawns and have a passed h pawn. Black's pawn isn't really dangerous. The white king is there. This is 2 against 2. But it's a draw with correct play, but black is the one who has to play correctly. And MVL realized he had to try to get a passed a pawn because potentially he can play a5, b5, a4 and get a passed a pawn. So he played a5. And then can't lose this pawn because this pawn's going to cost him the bishop. H6 is defended permanently. And black does what I said he would do, moves his pawns up. Okay, now in this position, yeah, he played the move c3, and he's hoping next move to play rook here. Obviously, if he plays rook here now, we can play king b4. So if white gets to move again, he's going to win the a pawn, and he'll win the game, but it's black's turn. Okay, and with so few pieces and pawns on the board, it's very likely going to be a draw, of course. And black can't move his king because he'll lose his pawn. He can't move his pawn because he'll lose his pawn. So he just chills and moves his bishop. And now he decides he wants to play a3. Good idea. And they just trade everything, so there's nothing left. And in the end, white decided he had to make the draw, not black, because potentially black could play bishop a3 and block the rook and win the game. This is the wrong colored rook pawn. When you get to an ending where your opponent has a bishop and there's some rook pawns on the board, you should know if it's the wrong colored rook pawn, and it is. Yeah. Now, this may sound silly to you, or it might not sound silly to you. It's against the rules in the Sinquefield Cup to offer a draw. I'm not sure if it's the whole Grand Chess Tour or just the Sinquefield Cup. I'm not sure. No draw offer is allowed. The draw will happen when it's insufficient material to win, king versus king, or king and knight versus king, or there's a repetition. So if this was another tournament, they would agree to a draw here, but they're not allowed to. So they just play really fast. And here it was obvious to me that black would intentionally stalemate white, then the game ends quicker. And so he did. Okay. So that was a very good game where probably nobody made any mistakes after the preparation was over. I think for MVL, the preparation was over after the double exchange sack in this position. And I think Carlsen knew c4. Caruana knew c4 for sure. He played it instantly. I'm not sure if he knew queen h4. I think after queen h4, he thought a little while. When I look at the chess.com engine, queen h4 is not one of the three moves it gives. So it's possible he didn't know queen h4. It's possible. And I think both players played excellently this game, and it was a fair result.